Vanessa stood frozen in my daughter's kitchen, staring at the framed photo above the fireplace, like she'd seen a ghost. Her lipstick-smudged mouth opened slightly. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Oh my God." 5 minutes later, she was stumbling down Emma's front porch, in the rain, shaking so hard, she dropped her car keys into the wet grass beside the hydrangeas. I didn't follow her. Neither did my daughter. We just stood there in silence while her SUV backed out too fast and disappeared down the street. And standing there in my daughter's warm kitchen, smelling garlic bread and tomato sauce, cooling on the stove, I realized something I never thought I would. Some people spend their whole lives running from the very thing that could have saved them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To explain why Vanessa ran out of that house after 24 years, I gotta take you back to Columbus, Ohio, winter of 1999. Back when my knees still worked properly, and I thought love alone could hold a marriage together. Spoiler alert. It can't. I met Vanessa when I was 25. She worked the front counter at a bank downtown. Sharp cheekbones, bright smile, always dressed like she belonged somewhere nicer than Columbus. I worked maintenance for the Central Ohio Transit Authority, mostly buses, long shifts. Diesel smell soaked into my jackets no matter how much detergent I used. She used to tease me about it. "You smell like an engine," she'd laugh. "Pays the bills," I'd tell her. Back then, she'd kiss me anyway. Funny how fast people can change once life stops feeling exciting. We got married 2 years later at a small church outside Dublin. Nothing fancy. My mother cooked most of the food herself because we couldn't afford catering. For a while we were okay. Not movie happy. Real happy. Friday pizza nights. Cheap road trips to Lake Erie. Sitting on lawn chairs outside our apartment because we didn't have air conditioning yet. But Vanessa always wanted more. Bigger cities, better restaurants, richer friends. She used to sit flipping through magazines talking about Scottsdale or San Diego like Ohio personally offended her. Meanwhile, I was just trying to keep the lights on. When she got pregnant with Emma, I thought maybe things would settle down. Instead, it got worse. Emma was colicky as a baby, hardly slept. Vanessa hated being stuck inside the apartment all day while I worked overtime. I'd come home at midnight smelling like grease and cold air, and she'd already be angry before I stepped through the door. One night in February, I found her standing in the kitchen crying while Emma screamed in her bassinet. Dirty bottles in the sink, TV flickering in the background, snow piling outside the apartment window. Vanessa looked exhausted. Not tired, hollow. "I can't do this anymore," she said. I tried taking Emma from her arms, but Vanessa stepped back. "You don't mean that I told her quietly?" "Yes, I do." Emma kept crying between us. Then Vanessa said the sentence I still remember word for word 24 years later. "You and that baby are going to ruin my future." Not our future. Her future. That should have told me everything right there. 3 days later, I came home from work and found half the closet empty. One suitcase gone. Wedding picture missing from the shelf. And Emma asleep in her crib beside a handwritten note that simply said, "I can't live like this." That was it. No apology. No promise to come back. Just gone. At first I thought maybe she needed space. A week passed. Then 2. By the 3rd week I understood. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a single father with a 3-month-old baby and $36 in my checking account. Those first few years blur together now. A lot of exhaustion, a lot of noise. Emma crying at 2 a.m. while I heated bottles in our tiny kitchen. Driving to Kroger before sunrise because diapers were on sale. Falling asleep in a recliner beside her crib because I was scared I wouldn't hear her coughing. There's no applause for that kind of life. Nobody tells fathers they're doing a good job at daycare pickup. Most people just look uncomfortable. Especially back then. I still remember one mother at preschool asking me, "So where's Emma's mom?" Like she couldn't process a man standing there alone holding a juice box and a backpack covered in cartoon ducks. I learned everything the hard way. How to braid hair from another dad at church. how to sew costume wings for school plays, how to keep smiling when Emma asked questions I couldn't answer. Why doesn't Mommy call? That one nearly killed me every time. I never trashed Vanessa in front of Emma. Never. Didn't matter how angry I was. Kids deserve better than inheriting adult bitterness. Still, loneliness changes a man. There were nights after Emma went to sleep when I'd sit in the garage pretending to fix things, just so I didn't have to think. Cold beer. Country radio low. Hands cracked from work. I'd stare at that old knitted baby blanket Vanessa left behind. Cheap thing, yellow stitching coming loose at the corners. But Emma loved it. Used to drag it all over the apartment when she was little. So I kept it. Not for Vanessa. For my daughter. And somehow, life moved forward. Emma grew up smart. Tough, too. By high school, she was getting better grades than I ever dreamed of getting myself. Then nursing school. Then trauma care in Cincinnati. The first time I saw her wearing hospital scrubs, I sat in my truck afterward and cried like an idiot in the parking garage. Not because I was sad. Because we made it. Against all odds, we actually made it. By then, I hadn't heard Vanessa's name in years. Not until that Thursday evening in October. I was home watching an old rerun of MASH with the volume too loud, like every man over 50 eventually does. Phone rang. Emma. Something in her voice felt off immediately. Dad. Everything okay? Long silence. Then, someone messaged me online. I already knew. I don't know how. I just knew. The room suddenly felt colder. Finally, I asked quietly, "Your mother?" Emma exhaled slowly. Yeah. And just like that, after 24 years, Vanessa was back. For the next 2 days, I barely slept. Funny thing about getting older. You stop fearing fistfights, or overdue bills, or bad weather. What really gets under your skin are the things you thought were buried for good, suddenly showing back up at your door. Or in this case, in your daughter's Facebook messages. Emma forwarded them to me the morning after her call. I sat at my kitchen table with reading glasses halfway down my nose and stared at words written by a woman I hadn't seen in almost a quarter-century. Hi, Emma. I know I probably don't deserve a response. That opening alone irritated me. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded practiced. Like something copied from a daytime talk show. There were 6 messages total. A lot of vague regret. A lot of finding myself. A lot of talk about healing and second chances. One line stood out, though. I think about you every single day. I actually laughed when I read that. Not a happy laugh either. The kind a man makes when something hurts and annoys him at the same time. 24 birthdays. 24 Christmas mornings. 24 years of school concerts, fevers, braces, graduation ceremonies, bad boyfriends, nursing exams, apartment, moves, heartbreaks, and victories. And now suddenly she thought about her every day. Sure, Emma came over that afternoon after her shift at the hospital, still wearing navy blue scrubs under her coat, hair tied back, messy, exhausted eyes. Trauma nursing ages people fast. She dropped onto my couch and handed me a bag from Wendy's. I brought you a burger, she said. You trying to kill me. You're already eating like a divorced raccoon. That made me smile a little. Emma always could cut tension without trying. We ate in the living room while the local news droned in the background. Some story about road construction near Cincinnati. Finally, she asked, "So what do you think?" I wiped ketchup off my fingers before answering. I think people usually come back because they need something. Emma nodded slowly like she already knew that. But knowing something logically and accepting it emotionally are 2 different things. That's especially true when it comes to parents. Even grown adults still carry that little kid somewhere inside them. The part that wonders, why wasn't I enough? Emma never said those words out loud. She didn't have to. I could hear them anyway. That night, after she left, I made coffee and sat at my old desktop computer in the spare bedroom. And I did something I hadn't done in years. I searched Vanessa online. Turns out people leave a lot of breadcrumbs these days. Facebook, Instagram, old court records. It didn't take long. Vanessa had spent the last 20 years bouncing between Arizona and Nevada mostly. 2 marriages after me. One ended in divorce. The other ended in bankruptcy. There were dozens of photos online. Vanessa posing beside rental cars, hotel pools, cocktails she probably couldn't afford. Everything filtered within an inch of reality. Under one picture, she'd written, "Finally choosing peace over toxic survival mode." I stared at that sentence for a while. Toxic survival mode. Meanwhile, I remembered fixing buses during January snowstorms with 3 layers of socks because over time kept Emma in Catholic school. Funny how people rewrite history once enough time passes. The deeper I looked, the uglier things got. Unpaid taxes. A civil lawsuit from a casino outside Tucson. Then I found something else. Family court documents. That stopped me cold. Vanessa had a 16-year-old son from her second marriage. Apparently, there was an ugly custody fight happening after the divorce. I'm no lawyer, but even I could understand enough from the paperwork. Her ex-husband's attorney was arguing Vanessa lacked family stability and long-term parental consistency. Translation: deadbeat mother. And suddenly her timing made perfect sense. A few months earlier, Emma had been featured in a local Cincinnati news segment after helping save multiple victims during a highway pileup on I-75. The station interviewed her outside the hospital. They mentioned, respected trauma nurse, homeowner, happily married. Perfect image. Perfect daughter. Exactly the kind of thing a struggling woman might suddenly want, attached to her name in court. I leaned back in my chair feeling sick. Not angry exactly. Just tired. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from realizing somebody still hasn't changed after 24 years. The next Saturday, Emma drove up from Cincinnati again. Rainy afternoon. Gray skies. One of those damp Ohio days where your joints ache before you even get out of bed. She found me in the garage pretending to organize tools I'd already organized twice. "You've been thinking too hard," she said. "What gives it away? You alphabetized your screwdriver drawer." Fair point. We sat on old folding chairs beside the workbench while rain tapped against the garage door. Emma looked nervous. Not scared of Vanessa. Scared of wanting something from her. That's worse. I keep asking myself why now she admitted quietly. I didn't answer right away. Because sometimes telling your child the full truth feels like handing them a brick and asking them to hold it forever. Instead, I asked, "What do you want out of this?" She stared down at her coffee cup. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Long silence. Then finally, I think I just want to hear her explain it once. That hurt more than I expected. Because after all these years, part of Emma still believed there might be an explanation big enough to make abandonment make sense. There isn't. There never is. I rubbed my hands together, slowly feeling old scars across my knuckles from years working on engines. "Kiddo," I said gently. "One time is rarely just one time." Emma looked up at me. "You think she's lying?" "No," I answered honestly. "I think she believes whatever version of herself helps her sleep at night." That sat between us for a while. Later that evening, Emma helped me make frozen pizza because neither of us felt like cooking. She laughed when I dropped shredded cheese all over the floor. "You're hopeless. I raised you alone. Show some respect. You kept buying me cereal for dinner. You loved cereal. I was 8. For a few minutes, things felt normal again. Then my phone rang. Unknown Arizona number. I almost ignored it. Should have trusted my instincts. "Hello?" The woman on the line sounded irritated before I even spoke. "We're attempting to reach Vanessa Holloway regarding a financial matter. Are you a relative?" Holloway. Not Mercer. Somewhere along the line, Vanessa had taken another man's name, too. "No," I said flatly. "Well, this number was listed as family contact information." I closed my eyes. Of course it was. "Remove it," I said. Then I hung up. Emma had heard enough from the kitchen to understand. She looked at me carefully. And in that moment, I think we both realized the same thing. Vanessa hadn't suddenly rediscovered motherhood. She'd simply run out of places to go. 2 days later, Emma texted her. One dinner. One conversation. That was all. And against every instinct I had, I agreed to be there. Because something deep down told me this wasn't going to end quietly. The worst lies aren't always the ones people tell out loud. Sometimes the worst ones are the things you keep buried because you think silence is protecting somebody. That's the part nobody warns you about when you become a parent. You spend half your life trying to decide which truths your child is old enough to survive. 3 days before the dinner with Vanessa, I realized Emma deserved the whole story. Not the cleaned-up version I'd been feeding her since kindergarten. The real one. I drove down to Cincinnati after work, carrying a grocery bag with 2 things inside. A burnt apple pie from Kroger, an old manila envelope I hadn't opened in almost 20 years. Emma opened the door, wearing gray sweatpants and one of those oversized University of Cincinnati hoodies she stole from her husband. You drove an hour and a half to bring me dessert poisoning. It was on sale. That explains the burn marks. She stepped aside, smiling faintly, but I could already tell she'd been crying earlier. You learn those things as a parent. Puffy eyes, quiet voice, the way somebody moves around their own kitchen when their mind's somewhere else. Her husband, Mark, was still downtown at the law firm, so it was just the 2 of us. Rain tapped softly against the windows, while I stood awkwardly in her kitchen, holding that envelope like it weighed 50 pounds. Emma noticed immediately. What's that? I didn't answer right away. That was my first mistake. Because when your silence changes shape, your kids feel it instantly. Dad. I finally sat down at the kitchen table and slid the envelope toward her. There are some things I should have told you a long time ago. Her expression changed immediately. Not fear exactly. More like emotional bracing. The kind nurses probably develop after years in emergency rooms. I rubbed my palms against my jeans before speaking. When your mother left, it wasn't just because she was overwhelmed. Emma stayed quiet. She wanted me to give you up. That landed hard. Not dramatic hard. Worse. The quiet kind. Emma blinked once slowly. What? She said we'd both have better lives if another family raised you. The kitchen suddenly felt too still. I could hear the refrigerator humming behind us. Rain outside. A dog barking somewhere down the street. Emma stared at me like she was trying to decide whether she misunderstood the sentence. She wanted me to put you up for adoption, I repeated softly. Emma leaned back in her chair. For a few seconds, she looked less like a 30-year-old trauma nurse and more like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. She actually said that. More than once. Her jaw tightened. I hated myself a little right then, because I knew exactly what was happening behind her eyes. Every memory of childhood suddenly rearranging itself. Every unanswered question finding new meaning. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were old papers, folded so many times the edges had gone soft. Divorce documents. One hospital bracelet from when Emma was born. And the note. The original one Vanessa left behind. I handed it over. Emma read silently. Then she swallowed hard. I can't live like this. That part hurt her. But not as much as the next page. A second letter. One I'd never shown another human being before. Emma unfolded it slowly. I still remembered the day it arrived. Emma was 5 years old. Missing front tooth, purple rain boots, obsessed with chicken nuggets. I'd just gotten home from work when I found the envelope jammed into the apartment mailbox. No return address. Inside, Vanessa had written, "If you ever let her contact me, I'll tell her you kidnapped her." Emma stopped reading halfway through. Her face drained of color. "She threatened you." I nodded. For what? Because by then she had another boyfriend. Different life. She didn't want complications. Emma stood up so suddenly her chair scraped hard across the floor. Then she walked to the sink and just stood there breathing. I didn't move. Didn't try comforting her either. Some pain needs room first. Finally she asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" There it was. Not anger at Vanessa. Anger at me. And honestly, she had every right. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From feeling unwanted. Emma laughed once. Short, sharp, hurt. Well, mission accomplished. That one hit deep. I looked down at my hands. Grease stains still trapped around my fingernails from work earlier that morning. Hands that knew how to rebuild engines, but apparently not how to explain motherhood to a child. I didn't want you growing up hating yourself, I admitted quietly. Emma turned around finally. Tears running now. You should have let me decide how to feel. I nodded slowly. Because she was right. That was the hardest part. After that, the conversation fell apart. Not screaming. Not yelling. Almost worse. Emma became distant. Cold in that polite adult way. I left an hour later with half the burnt pie untouched on her counter. For the next 2 days, she barely answered my texts. I deserved that too. The second night, I sat alone in my garage, remembering another winter years earlier. Emma had been asleep upstairs. I'd been sitting exactly where I was now when Vanessa's letter arrived. I remembered reading those words over and over while an old Alan Jackson song played softly on the radio. Outside, snow piled against the driveway. Inside, I cried harder than I ever had in my adult life. Not because I missed Vanessa. Because I suddenly realized somebody could look at a little girl like Emma and still walk away without looking back. That broke something in me permanently. On the third morning, my phone finally buzzed. Emma. Just one message. Come over after work. That was it. When I arrived that evening, she opened the door, already laughing. I frowned. What? Without a word, she walked me into the kitchen. The burnt apple pie sat untouched on the counter. Except now there was a sticky note attached to it. Dad still can't bake. I stared at it. Then at her. Emma crossed her arms. You know what the saddest part is. What? I still ate some. I laughed for the first time in days. Real laughter this time. Emma stepped closer, then wrapped her arms around me tightly. I'm mad at you, she mumbled into my shoulder. I know. But I know why you did it. I swallowed hard. I just wanted you to have a normal childhood. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. That ship sailed when you started packing my lunches with expired yogurt. It was one time. It was chunky. That's how yogurt works. She laughed again despite herself. Then her face grew serious. I'm still meeting her. I nodded slowly. Okay, but not because I need a mother anymore. I waited. Emma looked me dead in the eyes. I need peace. And right then, standing in my daughter's kitchen, while rain rolled across the Cincinnati windows, I realized this dinner wasn't going to reopen old wounds. It was finally going to expose them. The night Vanessa came to dinner, it rained so hard the streets outside Emma's neighborhood looked black under the streetlights. Ohio gets that kind of rain in late October. Cold, steady. The kind that soaks through your jacket before you make it from the driveway to the front door. I got to Emma's house early, mostly because I was nervous. I told myself it was to help cook. That was a lie. Emma opened the door, wearing jeans and a dark green sweater hair tied back loosely. She looked calmer than she had a few days earlier, but I could still see tension around her eyes. You're 40 minutes early, she said. I'm old. We leave for things early. You once missed my choir concert because you stopped for gas station beef jerky. That was an emergency. Emma rolled her eyes and stepped aside. Her house always smelled warm. Garlic, coffee, clean laundry. The kind of place people actually lived in instead of staged for social media. Mark wasn't home yet. Some late meeting downtown. I helped set the table while Emma stirred sauce on the stove. Neither of us mentioned Vanessa for a while. Finally, Emma said quietly, I'm not scared of her. I know. I'm scared I'll feel sorry for her. That answer surprised me. Not because it was weak. Because it sounded exactly like Emma. She'd been that way since she was little. Bringing injured birds home. Crying over stray dogs. Working double shifts during COVID because she couldn't stand leaving overwhelmed co-workers alone. Too soft-hearted for this world sometimes. At 6:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. Emma froze for half a second before walking to the front door. I stayed in the kitchen pretending to rearrange silverware. Then I heard Vanessa's voice for the first time in 24 years. Older now. Thinner. Still trying too hard. Oh my God. Emma. I looked up as they walked into the kitchen. Time had not been kind to Vanessa. Not physically exactly. Artificially. Everything about her looked maintained instead of natural. Too white teeth, too smooth forehead, heavy makeup sitting badly under bright kitchen lights. She wore a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment 10 years ago. But the straps on her designer purse were peeling at the edges. That told me more than anything else. People with real money usually don't cling so hard to looking rich. Vanessa stopped when she saw me. For 1 second, something real crossed her face. Guilt, maybe. Or shame. Then the performance returned. Daniel. Vanessa. Emma gestured awkwardly toward the table. Can we just sit? Dinner started painfully. The kind of conversation where everybody keeps reaching for water glasses just to avoid eye contact. Vanessa talked too much right away. Classic nervous behavior. I followed your nursing career online, she told Emma. I'm so proud of you. Emma nodded once. You didn't know where I went to college. That hit harder than yelling would've. Vanessa recovered quickly, though. Well, social media makes it easier now. Not an answer. Just fog. The longer dinner went, the more cracks started showing. Vanessa forgot Emma's age twice. Claimed she always wanted to reconnect. Talked vaguely about bad relationships and finding herself. At one point, she even said, Your father and I were both young. I almost laughed. Number one of us stayed. That's the difference. Emma noticed everything too, I could tell. Nurses observe people for a living. Vanessa's shaking fingers. The nicotine stains hidden beneath pale nail polish. The tiny panic flashes whenever conversations got specific. This wasn't a woman at peace. This was a woman barely holding herself together. Then things got strange. Vanessa kept studying the house, not admiring it, assessing it. Her eyes moved constantly. Kitchen appliances, wedding photos, furniture-framed artwork. Like she was mentally calculating value. That bothered me immediately. Then came the moment everything shifted. Above the fireplace hung a framed photograph from a charity gala downtown. Emma and Mark smiling beside Mark's parents. Vanessa looked up casually at first, then stopped breathing. Actually stopped. Her entire body locked up. I followed her gaze. Richard Holloway, Mark's father. CEO of Holloway Logistics. One of the wealthiest men in Cincinnati. Vanessa whispered before she could stop herself. No. Emma frowned immediately. You okay? Vanessa stared at the photo too long. Way too long. Then suddenly. How do you know them? Emma looked confused. That's Mark's family. Vanessa turned pale under all that makeup. The Richard Holloway. Emma blinked. Yeah. And right there, sitting in my daughter's dining room while rain battered the windows outside. I knew. Not everything. But enough. Because I had seen that look before. Years ago. Back when Vanessa still believed rich people could rescue her from ordinary life. The rest came together slowly over the next 10 minutes. Tiny pieces. Vanessa suddenly asking what Mark did at the company. Whether Richard still traveled often. Whether Emma spent holidays with the Holloways. Questions that sounded casual but weren't. Then at 6:23 p.m., the front door opened. Mark walked in carrying takeout desserts from a bakery downtown. Behind him came his parents. Apparently they'd stopped by unexpectedly after a charity fundraiser nearby. And the second Richard Holloway saw Vanessa standing in that kitchen, every ounce of color vanished from his face. Nobody spoke. Not for at least 3 full seconds. Mark looked confused immediately. Dad. Richard stared at Vanessa like he'd seen a corpse sitting at the dinner table. Vanessa tried smiling. It failed completely. Richard's wife, Patricia, noticed the tension instantly. Women always do. I'm sorry, Patricia said slowly. Have we met before? Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then Richard answered too quickly. No. Lie. Obvious lie. Emma looked from Richard to Vanessa carefully now, her trauma nurse instincts kicking in hard, watching reactions, heart rates, body language. And Vanessa. She was unraveling in real time. A few awkward introductions followed. Nobody relaxed. Richard kept avoiding eye contact with me. That alone told me enough. Then about 5 minutes later, I walked into the hallway near the laundry room and heard hushed voices around the corner. Vanessa. And Richard. "You owe me after what happened," Vanessa hissed quietly. Richard sounded furious. "You need to leave right now. I lost everything because of you. Not here." Then silence. I stepped back before they noticed me. And suddenly, after 24 years, I finally understood why my wife abandoned our daughter. It wasn't freedom she chose. It was fantasy. And now that fantasy was collapsing in my daughter's kitchen. When I walked back into the dining room, nobody was pretending anymore. You could feel it in the air. That heavy silence adults create when everybody suddenly realizes they're standing too close to something ugly. Emma stood beside the kitchen island, holding a dish towel in both hands. Mark looked confused and embarrassed. Patricia Holloway had gone completely still in that rich people way. Calm face, sharp eyes, dangerous silence. And Richard. Richard looked like a man whose past had just kicked open the front door. Vanessa came back from the hallway trying to fix her expression, but her hands were trembling too hard now. Nobody sat back down. Dinner was over whether anyone admitted it or not. Mark finally broke the silence. "Okay, what's going on?" No one answered immediately. Richard loosened his tie slightly. Patricia looked at him once and said quietly, "Richard." That tone told me this wasn't the first secret she'd ever dragged out of him. Vanessa suddenly tried smiling at Emma again. "Big mistake. Sweetheart," she said softly. "This is all just very unexpected." Emma cut her off. "Why do you know my father-in-law?" Vanessa froze. Richard spoke first. "She worked for my company years ago." Worked. Not slept with. Not disappeared with. Not helped destroy 2 families. Worked. Emma noticed the wording too. I could see it in her face. Trauma nurses hear lies for a living. People bleeding out still try lying about drugs, affairs, drinking, all kinds of things. Emma had developed that quiet stare medical workers get when they already know the truth, but want to see whether you'll tell it yourself. Vanessa laughed nervously. It was a long time ago. Patricia folded her arms slowly. How long? Nobody answered. Then Mark looked at his father. Dad. Richard rubbed his forehead hard. And finally Vanessa snapped. Maybe panic did it. Maybe humiliation. Or maybe she realized the fantasy she walked in carrying was dying too fast to save. I left my husband because of him. Okay, she blurted. Dead silence. Rain hammered harder against the windows. Mark stared at his father like he'd never seen him before. Patricia didn't move at all. Emma blinked slowly. I honestly think part of her already knew before the words came out. Vanessa kept talking too fast now. He told me things were going to change. He said he was unhappy. He said. Richard cut her off sharply. I never promised you a life together. Oh, that's convenient now. You made your own decisions. Vanessa laughed bitterly. My own decisions. I was 28 years old and stupid enough to believe you. That part at least sounded honest. For the first time all night, the performance cracked open completely. I looked at Vanessa standing there in my daughter's kitchen mascara, beginning to smear under her eyes, and suddenly I could almost see the younger woman she used to be. Restless, shallow, desperate to escape ordinary life, and stupid enough to confuse attention with love. Patricia finally spoke. Very calm. Richard, is this true? Richard didn't answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Mark muttered, Jesus Christ. Emma still hadn't spoken. That was what scared me most. She wasn't emotional. She was processing. Carefully. Like she did at the hospital. One fact at a time. Finally, she looked directly at Vanessa. So you left Dad because you thought someone richer would save you. Vanessa immediately shook her head. It wasn't like that. Emma's expression didn't change. Then explain it. Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because there wasn't an explanation that sounded better than the truth. I noticed Richard staring at the floor now. Ashamed. Good. About time. Vanessa's breathing got shakier. You don't understand how trapped I felt, she said quietly. I was drowning. I was young. I thought I had one chance at a better life. I finally spoke for the first time in almost 20 minutes. You had a daughter. Vanessa looked at me. And for a second, real guilt hit her full force. Not embarrassment. Not manipulation. Actual guilt. But it came 24 years too late. Emma walked slowly toward the fireplace, then picked up the framed family photo Vanessa had frozen at earlier. Mark beside her, Richard and Patricia smiling. A normal family picture. Emma stared at it a moment before speaking. You know what's crazy, she said softly. I spent years imagining what meeting you would feel like. Vanessa's eyes filled immediately. Emma, I thought maybe there'd be some huge explanation. Some tragedy. Some reason you disappeared. The room stayed completely still. Then Emma looked directly at her mother. But this, she shook her head slowly. You left because you were chasing money and attention. Vanessa began crying openly now. I made mistakes. Emma's voice hardened for the first time all night. No, you made choices. That line hit hard. Even Richard closed his eyes briefly. Vanessa stepped forward desperately. I'm still your mother. And there it was. The sentence she thought would save her. Emma answered immediately. Blood didn't keep you here. Love did. Vanessa stopped moving. Emma's eyes filled slightly, but her voice stayed steady. And you had neither. Nobody spoke after that. Not for several seconds. The only sound was rain hitting the gutters outside. Then Patricia quietly picked up her purse. We'll discuss this at home, she told Richard. No screaming. No drama. Honestly, that made it worse. Mark looked devastated too, embarrassed for his father, horrified for Emma. Richard finally turned toward me. His face looked older than it had 30 minutes earlier. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I believed he meant it. But some apologies arrive long after they matter. I nodded once. Nothing else needed saying. Then Emma disappeared upstairs briefly. When she came back down, she carried something folded in her hands. The old knitted baby blanket. Yellow stitching worn thin at the corners. Vanessa stared at it immediately. Oh my God. Emma walked to the front door and opened it. Cold rain air swept into the house. Then she handed the blanket to Vanessa. This is the only thing you ever left me, Emma said quietly. Vanessa took it with shaking hands. Emma's voice softened slightly then. Not forgiving. Just finished. We don't need it anymore. Vanessa completely broke after that. Not movie crying. Real crying. Ugly, humiliating, hopeless. She stumbled toward the porch, still clutching the blanket against her chest. And 5 minutes after finally meeting the daughter she abandoned 24 years earlier, Vanessa Mercer ran out into the Ohio rain, trembling so hard she could barely hold her car keys. While inside that warm kitchen, my daughter stood beside me quietly. And for the first time in her life, she stopped waiting for her mother to come back. After Vanessa ran out, nobody moved for a while. The front door stayed open just wide enough for cold rain air to slip inside. Emma stood there, looking out at the driveway, long after Vanessa's taillights disappeared. I wanted to say something. I wanted to fix it. That's what fathers do even when their daughters are grown women with mortgages and hospital badges and husbands who love them. But there are some moments you can't repair with words. So I just stood beside her. Eventually, Mark walked over and gently closed the door. Patricia and Richard left soon after. Patricia didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't ask Emma for explanations. She didn't owe anybody. She simply touched Emma's arm and said, I'm sorry this happened in your home. Then she looked at Richard. One look. That was enough. I'd worked around engines my whole life. I knew the sound of something breaking, even when it didn't make noise. Their marriage didn't end in that kitchen, not officially, but something in it cracked wide open. Mark stayed close to Emma the rest of the night. I could see how badly he wanted to protect her from his family's mess, but Emma wasn't fragile. Hurt, yes. Fragile number. Around 9:30, she finally sat down at the kitchen table and put both hands around a cold mug of tea. Well, she said quietly, that was worse than I expected. I almost laughed, then stopped myself. Emma looked at me and gave the tiniest smile. No, Dad. You can laugh. It was awful enough to be funny. So I did. Just a little. Because sometimes humor is the only thing standing between you and falling apart. For the next few weeks, life felt strange. Vanessa disappeared again. No calls. No messages. No dramatic apology. Nothing. Part of me wasn't surprised. People like Vanessa don't usually leave once. They leave in stages every time responsibility catches up with them. Richard's situation became private family business. Mark didn't talk about it much, and I didn't ask. I respected that. All I knew was Patricia moved into their lake house for a while, and Richard suddenly looked 10 years older every time I saw him. As for Emma, she went back to work. That's what nurses do. They carry their own wounds into rooms full of people who need them more urgently. One evening in November, I drove down to Cincinnati to take her dinner. Nothing fancy. A rotisserie chicken from Kroger potato salad, and those dinner rolls she always pretended not to like while eating 4. She opened the door and said, "You brought old man picnic food." "You're welcome." We ate at the kitchen island. The same kitchen where everything had broken open. For a while, neither of us mentioned Vanessa. Then Emma looked toward the fireplace where the family photo still sat. She had not taken it down. That surprised me. "You okay looking at that?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's still my life. I'm not letting her ruin another piece of it." That sounded like healing to me. Not perfect, but real. A few months later, in early spring, Emma called me on a Sunday morning. I was in the driveway checking tire pressure on my truck, wearing an old brown sweatshirt with a coffee stain across the front. "Dad," she said. Something in her voice stopped me cold. "What happened?" "Nothing bad." I stood up too fast and my knee popped. "Then why do you sound like that?" She laughed through the phone. "Because I'm pregnant." I didn't speak. Couldn't. Just stood there, holding a tire gauge in one hand, like a fool, while birds chirped in the neighbor's maple tree. "Dad, I'm here. You okay?" "No." She laughed again, softer this time. A month later, I went with her and Mark to one of the appointments because Mark got stuck in court. I sat in that doctor's office feeling wildly out of place among pastel posters and tiny plastic models of babies. Then the technician turned on the monitor, and there it was. That fast little heartbeat. I had heard engines roar, brakes, scream metal snap, and buses cough themselves back to life on freezing mornings. But nothing ever sounded like that. I wiped my eyes before Emma could see. She saw anyway. "Dad," she whispered. "What?" "You're crying. Allergies. It's March. Pollen starts early." She squeezed my hand. Later that afternoon, we sat outside a small coffee shop near the hospital. The weather had finally warmed up. People were walking dogs. Traffic hummed on the street like ordinary life didn't know what miracle had just happened. Emma stared into her cup for a long moment. Then she said, "I used to wonder what was wrong with me." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" That made her leave. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes didn't. "When I was little, even when I got older, I wondered if I cried too much as a baby, if I was too needy, if something about me made her not want to stay. That broke my heart in a way anger never could. I reached across the table and took her hand. "No, Em. I know that now," she said. "I really do." She looked down at her belly, still barely showing. "It was never about me." I nodded, but my throat was too tight to answer. That was the truth I had wanted her to reach for 24 years. Not because I told her, because she finally believed it. That summer I found the old letter again. The one Vanessa sent when Emma was 5. I'd kept it in a metal box in the garage for years, not because I needed proof anymore. Maybe because some part of me wasn't ready to let go of being angry. One evening, I took it out to the backyard fire pit. The sun was going down over Columbus, turning the sky soft orange behind the rooftops. Cicadas buzzed in the trees. Somebody nearby was grilling burgers. Ordinary sounds. Good sounds. I unfolded the paper one last time. The words looked smaller than I remembered. Less powerful. Almost pathetic. Then I dropped it into the flame. It curled black around the edges, first then disappeared into ash. I thought I'd feel victory. Instead, I felt peace. And peace, I've learned, is better. A few weeks later, I sat on Emma's porch holding my granddaughter for the first time. Tiny fingers. Pink blanket. That warm newborn weight against my chest. Emma sat beside me, tired and smiling. Mark was inside making coffee, badly banging cabinet doors, like a man who had never been trusted with a kitchen before. Emma looked over at me and said, "You were enough, Dad." I looked down at that baby, so she wouldn't see my face fall apart. For years, I thought revenge would mean Vanessa regretting what she did. But that wasn't it. The real revenge was quieter. It was birthday candles, packed lunches, hospital graduations, late-night phone calls, a daughter who knew love because someone stayed long enough to teach it. Vanessa spent 24 years running after a future that never existed. I spent 24 years building one. In the end, I think that says everything. If you've ever been the parent who stayed when someone else walked away, then you probably understand this story better than most. Thanks for listening, and take care of the people who show up when it matters.